The doctors couldn't explain why Rachel Brooks was still alive. For 6 months, her husband had been slipping arsenic into her morning coffee, calculated doses that should have killed her weeks ago. But what David didn't know was that Maria, their housekeeper of 3 years, had been watching him through the reflection in the kitchen's stainless steel backsplash every single morning. And every single day, while serving Rachel her breakfast in bed, Maria switched the cups. What's about to unfold is the most twisted game of cat and mouse you've ever heard, where the person saving a life is risking everything. The person taking a life thinks he's winning, and the person whose life hangs in the balance has no idea she's caught between them. Drop a comment right now telling me, would you drink from a cup if you weren't completely sure who prepared it? Because by the end of this story, you'll never look at your morning coffee the same way again. Maria Dominguez had worked in wealthy households across Connecticut for 15 years, but the Brooks estate was different from the moment she walked through the door. It wasn't the obvious things that set off her instincts. Not the cold marble floors or the fact that Rachel and David barely spoke to each other during that first interview. It was something smaller. When Rachel had reached for a glass of water during their conversation, David had immediately stood up, taken the glass from her hand, and insisted on getting her a fresh one from the kitchen himself. Most people would have seen a devoted husband. Maria saw a man who needed control over everything his wife consumed. She accepted the position anyway. $7,200 a month to clean a house that was already pristine, to cook meals for a couple who barely ate together, to exist in the peripheral vision of two people performing a marriage for an invisible audience. The red flags she'd noticed during the interview didn't fade. They multiplied. David worked from home 3 days a week, always positioning himself in the study with a clear view of the kitchen. On the days he went to his office in Stamford, he called the house phone at irregular intervals, always asking to speak to Rachel, always with some excuse about dinner plans or an appointment he'd forgotten to mention. But Maria understood what he was really doing. He was checking that Rachel was still there, still breathing, still under his watch. Rachel Brooks was 34 years old and looked like she was dying. That wasn't an exaggeration. In the 3 weeks Maria had been working there, she'd watched Rachel's hair thin, her skin take on a grayish pallor, her hands develop a tremor that made her drop things constantly. Rachel blamed it on stress from her job as an architect. She'd started working from home more, taking frequent naps, canceling meetings with clients. The first time Maria saw David prepare Rachel's coffee, she was wiping down the counters in the kitchen while he stood at the espresso machine. He didn't know she was watching. Most people didn't really see their housekeepers, didn't register them as witnesses to anything important. That invisibility had taught Maria more about human nature than any psychology course ever could. David made 2 cups, one for himself, one for Rachel. Identical white ceramic mugs. He prepared them exactly the same way. Double shot of espresso, steamed oat milk, 1 pump of vanilla syrup. But after both cups were finished, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small amber bottle, the kind that might hold prescription medication. He uncapped it, tipped it over Rachel's mug, and 3 drops of clear liquid disappeared into the foam. Then he recapped the bottle, slipped it back into his pocket, picked up both mugs, and walked toward the stairs leading to Rachel's home office on the 2nd floor. Maria's hands had gone still on the counter. Her heart was hammering, but her face remained blank. That skill had kept her safe in situations far more dangerous than this one. She'd learned it young, growing up in Juarez during the cartel wars, where the wrong expression at the wrong moment could get your entire family killed. She didn't know what was in that bottle, but she knew that whatever David was doing, he was doing it systematically, secretly, and with the confidence of someone who'd been doing it for a while. That night, Maria lay awake in her small apartment in Bridgeport, staring at the ceiling. She could quit, walk away. It wasn't her business what happened in that house. She'd signed on to clean and cook, not to navigate the dangerous waters of a marriage that was clearly drowning in something toxic. But she kept seeing Rachel's face. The way her eyes had started to look sunken. The way she'd gripped the stair railing last Tuesday like she might collapse without it. The way she'd apologized profusely when she'd vomited into the kitchen sink after drinking tea David had made her. Maria had left one dangerous country to build a life in another, had spent 15 years cleaning up after people who barely remembered her name, had sent money back to her sister and her nephews every single month without fail. She'd survived by being invisible, by keeping her head down, by never getting involved in anything that wasn't her business. But somewhere in her chest, in the place where she'd locked away every instinct to fight back against injustice, something had cracked open. She went back the next morning. This time, she watched more carefully. David made the coffee at exactly 7:15, the same routine. 2 cups, the amber bottle, 3 drops. But today, Maria was positioned differently, pretending to organize the spice cabinet, but actually angled so she could see which mug he doctored. He always put the tainted one on the right side of the counter. When David carried both mugs upstairs, Maria moved fast. She'd already prepared an identical cup of coffee, hidden in the microwave. She knew Rachel's office routine. David would knock, hand her the coffee, exchange maybe 30 seconds of conversation, then leave for his own office down the hall. Maria counted to 45 seconds. Then she climbed the stairs with a dust cloth as her excuse, her heart slamming against her ribs. Rachel's office door was open a crack. The poisoned coffee sat on her desk, steam still rising. Rachel was on a video call, her back to the door, headphones on. Maria slipped inside, picked up the mug, replaced it with the clean one from her apron pocket. The swap took 4 seconds. Rachel never turned around. Back in the kitchen, Maria poured the poisoned coffee down the drain and watched it disappear. Her hands were shaking now. What she'd just done, if David ever found out, could get her killed. She had no illusions about that. Men who poisoned their wives didn't have moral boundaries about what they'd do to protect their secrets. But Rachel Brooks was still alive. And as long as Maria could keep switching those cups, she would stay that way. What Maria didn't know yet was that David had been poisoning his wife for 6 months before she'd even been hired. That Rachel should already be dead, and that David was getting increasingly frustrated by his wife's inexplicable resilience. 3 weeks into Maria's secret intervention, David made his first mistake. He increased the dosage. Maria noticed it immediately. Instead of 3 drops from the amber bottle, he added 7. He'd also started varying his approach. Some mornings it was coffee. Other mornings, orange juice. Twice, he'd stirred something into the soup Maria had prepared for Rachel's lunch. But Maria had learned his patterns. She watched him the way a prey animal watches a predator, with absolute focus, perfect stillness, and a survival instinct honed by necessity. Every time David poisoned something intended for Rachel, Maria found a way to intercept it. She started preparing duplicate meals, keeping identical beverages ready. She'd developed an elaborate system, clean versions hidden in the garage refrigerator, in the microwave, in the pantry behind the flour. The house was large enough that David never noticed. He was too focused on Rachel to pay attention to what the housekeeper was doing. Rachel, meanwhile, started to improve. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. Her color returned slightly. The tremor in her hands lessened. She had more energy, started taking calls with clients again, even mentioned to Maria one morning that she was thinking about going for a walk in the neighborhood. That evening, Maria heard them arguing. She was in the kitchen, supposedly cleaning up after dinner, but the walls in the Brooks house were thinner than they looked, and the couple was standing in the living room directly adjacent. "You look better," David said. His tone was flat. "Your doctor must have figured out what's wrong." "I haven't been to the doctor in 3 weeks," Rachel replied. "I just started feeling better on my own. Maybe I was just burned out. Needed rest." There was a long pause. Then David's voice again, colder this time. "Maybe you should go anyway. Get a full workup. Blood tests." "Why?" "I feel fine now." "Because something made you sick, Rachel. Something made you so sick you couldn't get out of bed for days at a time. Don't you want to know what it was?" Another pause. When Rachel spoke again, her voice was quieter. "You're right. I'll make an appointment." Maria's stomach dropped. If Rachel got blood work done, if the doctors found arsenic in her system, the entire investigation would focus on the house. On David, yes, but also on Maria. She'd been there for 2 months now. She'd had access to everything Rachel consumed, and she had no proof of what she'd witnessed, nothing but her own word against a wealthy man with expensive lawyers. She was trapped in a paradox. She couldn't let Rachel die, but she also couldn't let the truth come out in a way that would implicate herself. That night, Maria did something she'd been avoiding. She called her nephew, Carlos, who worked in tech support in Brooklyn. She kept the explanation vague, told him she needed to know how to record video without anyone knowing. Carlos, who'd helped Maria navigate everything from smartphone setup to filing her taxes, didn't ask questions. He just told her which camera to buy and how to hide it. The next day, on her day off, Maria drove to Best Buy and spent $200 she couldn't afford on a tiny camera disguised as a phone charger. She spent another 4 hours watching YouTube videos on how to position it, angle it, make sure it captured what she needed. On Monday morning, she installed it in the kitchen, plugged into an outlet near the espresso machine. The angle was perfect. It captured David's hands, the amber bottle, the mugs on the counter. Everything. For 3 days, she collected footage. David poisoning Rachel's coffee. David stirring something into Rachel's tea. David adding drops to a smoothie Maria had made. And every single time, after David left the kitchen, the footage showed Maria switching the drinks. It was evidence. But evidence of what exactly? That David was trying to kill his wife? Yes, but also that Maria had known about it for weeks and hadn't called the police. That she'd been systematically deceiving both of them. That she'd inserted herself into a crime in progress without reporting it. She couldn't go to the police. Not yet. She needed Rachel to understand first, to see what was happening, to make the choice herself about what to do next. But approaching Rachel meant revealing everything. And revealing everything meant admitting that she'd been lying by omission for 2 months. That every time Rachel had thanked her for the coffee or the juice or the soup, Maria had smiled and said nothing while knowing exactly what David had intended for her. Would Rachel see her as a savior or as someone who'd let her suffer in the name of gathering evidence? The decision was taken out of her hands on a Thursday morning in late September. Maria arrived at the house at 7, same as always. But something was different. The front door was unlocked. That never happened. David was obsessive about security, about keeping everything locked and monitored. She pushed the door open slowly. "Hello? Mr. Brooks? Mrs. Brooks?" No answer. The kitchen was a disaster. Cabinet doors hanging open. Flowers spilled across the counter. A chair knocked over. And on the floor, next to the overturned chair, was the amber bottle. It must have fallen from David's pocket. Maria picked it up with a dish towel, careful not to touch it directly. The label had been partially scratched off, but she could still read part of it. Sodium arsenite solution. Her hands went numb. Footsteps on the stairs. Maria shoved the bottle into her apron pocket just as David appeared. He looked disheveled, his hair sticking up, his shirt wrinkled. His eyes were wild. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Who?" "Rachel. Where's my wife?" "I just arrived, Mr. Brooks." "I don't know." He pushed past her, checking the garage, the backyard, his home office, shouting Rachel's name, growing more frantic by the second. Maria stood in the kitchen, her heart racing, the bottle burning a hole in her pocket. Rachel was gone, and David clearly had no idea where. David called the police at 8:47 that morning. Maria listened from the kitchen as he spoke to the dispatcher, his voice trembling with what sounded like genuine panic. His wife was missing. She'd been sick recently, disoriented, confused. He was worried she'd wandered off and gotten hurt. 2 officers arrived within 20 minutes. They were professional, efficient. They asked David when he'd last seen Rachel. He said the night before, around 9, when they'd both gone to bed. He'd woken up at 6:30 and she was gone. Her car was still in the garage. Her phone was on her nightstand. Her purse was on the counter. One of the officers turned to Maria. "You're the housekeeper?" "Yes, sir." "When did you last see Mrs. Brooks?" "Yesterday afternoon. Around 4. I left at 5. "How did she seem?" Maria chose her words carefully. "Tired. She's been tired a lot lately." The officer made notes. They searched the house, the yard, the neighborhood. They put out a missing person report. They took a photo of Rachel from David's phone and said they'd circulate it. After they left, David collapsed onto the sofa. For a moment, Maria almost felt sorry for him. He looked destroyed. Then she remembered the amber bottle in her pocket, and the feeling evaporated. "I don't understand," David said, more to himself than to her. "Where could she have gone? She could barely walk up the stairs yesterday." Maria said nothing, but in her mind, she was calculating. Rachel hadn't been that weak yesterday. In fact, Rachel had seemed stronger every day for the past 2 months. Strong enough, apparently, to plan an escape. Had Rachel figured it out? Had she realized what David was doing? The answer came 3 days later, in the form of a letter. It arrived at the house addressed to David, but Maria saw it first when she collected the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was shaky, but recognizable. Rachel's. She left it on the kitchen counter where David would see it. Watch from the doorway as he opened it. saw his face go white as he read. "She knows," he whispered. Then, louder, crumpling the letter, "She knows." He looked up at Maria then, really looked at her for the first time in 3 months. His eyes were calculating now, the panic replaced by something sharper. "You," he said slowly. "You've been here every day? In the kitchen? You've seen everything I've done." Maria's blood turned to ice, but her face remained neutral. "I don't understand, Mr. Brooks. Don't lie to me." He stood up, crossed the space between them. "Rachel says in this letter that someone's been protecting her, that someone's been switching her food and drinks. There's only one person who could have done that." Maria took a step back. "I think I should go." "You're not going anywhere." He pulled out his phone. "I could call the police right now. Tell them you've been poisoning my wife. Tell them you're the reason she ran away, that you were probably planning to extort us. Who do you think they'll believe? A wealthy businessman or an illegal immigrant?" The slur hit its mark. Maria felt her hands curl into fists, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm a permanent resident, Mr. Brooks. I have papers. Papers can be questioned. Immigration status can be reviewed. Your sister's visa status, your nephew's schools. There are a lot of ways to destroy someone's life, Maria. I think you know that." This was it. The moment where silence would either save her or condemn her. Maria reached into her apron pocket, pulled out her phone, and held it up so David could see the screen. It showed the live feed from the camera in the kitchen. The camera that had been recording everything for the past 3 weeks. The camera that had captured every single time David had poisoned his wife's food. "I think the police would be very interested in this footage," Maria said quietly. "All of it. Time-stamped. Dated. Showing exactly what you've been doing to your wife for months." David's expression shifted through several emotions at once. Shock, rage, fear, then calculation again. "That's illegal," he said. "Recording someone without their consent. It won't be admissible in court. Maybe not in a criminal trial," Maria agreed. "But it would be very interesting to the media, to your business partners, to your wife's divorce attorney." They stood there in the kitchen, locked in a stalemate. Maria could see David's mind working, trying to find a way out, a way to regain control. He didn't find one. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "I want you to leave this house," Maria said. "I want you to transfer $5 million into Rachel's personal account. I want you to sign a confession admitting what you've been doing. And I want you to check yourself into a psychiatric facility for evaluation." David laughed, but it was hollow. "And if I don't, then I send this footage to the police, the FBI, the Connecticut Post, and every single one of your business contacts. And I testify about everything I've seen, everything you've done. They'll arrest you too, for not reporting it." "Maybe," Maria said, "but I'm not the one who tried to murder someone. I'm not the one who's going to prison for attempted homicide. And I think Rachel will make sure everyone knows exactly who saved her life." The truth was, Maria had no idea if Rachel would protect her. They'd barely spoken beyond pleasantries and meal preferences. But David didn't know that. And in that moment, the bluff was all she had. David stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out of the kitchen. 20 minutes later, he left the house with a suitcase. Rachel returned to the house 6 days after she disappeared. She looked different, stronger. Her hair was clean, her skin was better. She'd put on weight. She looked, Maria thought, like someone who'd just stepped out of a cave and seen sunlight for the first time in months. Maria was in the kitchen when Rachel walked in. For a moment, they just looked at each other. "Thank you," Rachel said finally. Maria nodded. "How did you know?" "I started feeling better when you arrived. Worse when you weren't here. I'm not stupid, Maria. I'm an architect. I notice patterns." She paused. "I just couldn't figure out who was trying to kill me and who was trying to save me. So I started doing my own tests, marking my cups with invisible ink, switching them myself sometimes, watching to see who reacted when I did. And you figured it out. It took longer than it should have. I didn't want to believe it was David." Rachel's voice cracked slightly. "We've been married for 8 years. I kept thinking there had to be another explanation. But there wasn't. No, there wasn't." Rachel pulled out a chair and sat down. "The night I left, I'd switched my own dinner without David knowing. He ate what he'd poisoned. Not enough to kill him, but enough to make him sick. That's when I knew for sure. And that's when I ran." Maria processed this. "Where did you go?" "A women's shelter in New Haven. They have protocols for situations like this. Attorneys who specialize in domestic violence. Therapists. Security." She looked down at her hands. "They believed me. Even without proof, They believed me. I have proof, Maria said. She pulled out her phone and showed Rachel the footage. Rachel watched in silence. When it was over, her face was pale but her jaw was set. Send that to my attorney. She's building a case. David's already agreed to a separation, but he's trying to claim I was the one who was unstable, that I imagined everything. This will change that. He threatened to report me, Maria said quietly. To immigration. To the police. He said I'd be charged too for not reporting it. Rachel met her eyes. You won't be charged with anything. I'll make sure of it. You saved my life, Maria. You had every reason to walk away, to protect yourself, and you didn't. I owe you everything. You don't owe me anything, Maria said. But she felt something loosen in her chest, some knot of fear she'd been carrying for 3 months. Actually, I do. I owe you about 6 months of hazard pay. Rachel pulled out her phone. Give me your bank account information. I'm transferring you $50,000. And I'm writing you a letter of recommendation that will get you any job you want for the rest of your life. Maria's throat tightened. That's too much. It's not even close to enough. You risked your life, your safety, your future in this country. Most people would have called the police and walked away. You stayed. You protected me every single day. You gave me time to figure out what was happening and plan my escape. Rachel's voice was firm now. Take the money, Maria. You earned it. 3 weeks later, Maria stood in a courtroom as Rachel's attorney presented evidence against David Brooks. The video footage, Rachel's medical records showing arsenic poisoning, testimony from the toxicologist, and Maria's own statement, describing everything she'd witnessed. David's attorney tried to argue that Maria had fabricated the evidence, that she'd been poisoning Rachel herself and framing David. But the timeline didn't work. Rachel had been sick for 6 months before Maria was even hired. And the medical evidence showed that Rachel's arsenic levels had been decreasing since Maria started working there, not increasing. The case never went to trial. David accepted a plea deal. 20 years in prison for attempted murder. Forfeiture of all marital assets. A restraining order that would last the rest of his life. Maria didn't attend the sentencing. She'd already moved on. Literally. Rachel's letter of recommendation had gotten her a job managing a household in Greenwich for a family who paid her $90,000 a year, gave her health insurance, and treated her with the kind of respect she'd never experienced before. She sent more money home to her sister, enrolled in community college to finish the degree she'd started 20 years ago, started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma, who helped her understand that what she'd done in the Brooks household wasn't just about saving Rachel. It was about reclaiming power in a world that had spent her entire life telling her she didn't have any. On a Tuesday in late November, Rachel invited Maria to lunch. They met at a small cafe in Stamford, sat across from each other at a window table. I'm selling the house, Rachel said. Too many bad memories. I'm moving to Portland. Starting my own architecture firm. That's good, Maria said. You deserve a fresh start. So do you. Rachel slid an envelope across the table. This is for you. Maria opened it. Inside was a check for $200,000. Rachel, it's David's money. From the asset forfeiture. I don't want it, but I want you to have it. Buy a house. Start a business. Do whatever you want. Just promise me you'll stop putting yourself in danger to save other people. Maria smiled. I can't promise that. I know. Rachel smiled back. That's why I'm giving you the money. So that the next time you decide to be a hero, at least you'll have a safety net. They finished their lunch talking about architecture and gardening and Maria's nephews and Rachel's plans for her new firm. They didn't talk about David. They didn't talk about poison. They didn't talk about the 6 months that had almost killed one of them and had transformed both of them. When they parted ways in the parking lot, Rachel hugged Maria tightly. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me, for refusing to look away. Thank you, Maria whispered back, for trusting me, for believing I was worth protecting too. So here's my question for you. How many warning signs do you ignore every day? How many times have you seen something that made you uncomfortable and told yourself it wasn't your business? How many Maria Dominguez are out there right now, watching crimes unfold in real time, trying to decide whether speaking up is worth the risk? Drop a comment and let me know. Would you have done what Maria did? Would you have stayed quiet and kept yourself safe? Or would you have put everything on the line for a stranger? And if you made it this far, hit that subscribe button because stories like this, the ones that show you the darkness people are capable of and the extraordinary courage it takes to fight back, these are the stories that matter. These are the stories that might just save someone's life. Thanks for watching. And remember, pay attention to who's making your coffee.